Most people think of the Great Depression as simply banks failing and stocks collapsing. But the real story is darker. In 1933, the United States government made gold illegal, not just difficult to own, not taxed heavily, illegal. Americans surrendered their gold, the government confiscated it, revalued it, and pocketed billions in profit. The shocking part? It worked. The whole thing was buried in history textbooks as a necessary measure. But this confiscation wasn't an isolated act. It was a blueprint that governments worldwide have copied whenever they needed control over wealth and money. By 1933, America was drowning. The stock market had crashed 4 years earlier. Unemployment hit 25%. Half the banks had failed. People panicked and rushed to withdraw their money. What they reached for was gold. Americans had been taught that gold was the ultimate safe haven, the one asset government couldn't print away, so they hoarded it, stuffed it in mattresses, buried it in yards, locked it in safes. This terrified the government because America was tied to the gold standard. Every dollar had to be backed by 40% gold. If Americans held gold instead of paper money, the system would seize up. The government would lose its ability to print money. So, on April 5th, 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. It forbade the hoarding of gold coin, bullion, and certificates. Not suggested, forbade. The penalties were severe: 10 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, over $170,000 today, or both citizens had less than 1 month to surrender their holdings to the Federal Reserve or face prosecution. The government offered compensation $20.67 per troy ounce. It sounds fair on paper. But here's where the real trick happens. In 1934, Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act. It changed the official price of gold to $35 per ounce. In a single stroke, the government had seized Americans' gold at one price, then immediately revalued it at a higher price. The profit? About $14 per ounce on millions of ounces. Multiply that across the entire confiscation, over 2,600 metric tons, and you're talking about billions in modern dollars. The government didn't just take the gold, it took the gold at a discount, then made itself a massive profit on the revaluation. And Americans who had surrendered their life savings in gold received nothing extra. They got the original price, locked in by force. Some exceptions were made. You could keep up to $100 in gold coins, about 5 ounces, and rare collectible coins with recognized special value were exempt. This created an entire investment category that's still alive today. Numismatic coins, collectibles, rarities that fall outside government seizure powers smart people caught on immediately. But most didn't. Frederick Barber Campbell refused to comply. When he tried to withdraw 5,000 troy ounces of gold at Chase National Bank, the bank refused. He sued Chase. The government indicted him the next day. Campbell actually won. A judge ruled Executive Order 6102 invalid because it was signed by the president, not the Treasury Secretary. It terrified the Roosevelt administration. They issued new orders signed by Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau Jr. Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act through to give it permanent backing. Campbell's victory was crushed. His gold was confiscated anyway. Individual resistance was futile once the government mobilized. America wasn't unique. Governments worldwide used the same playbook. In 1959, Australia passed a law allowing gold seizures, if expedient to do so, for the protection of the currency. That's government code for whenever we want. The United Kingdom banned citizens from owning more than 4 gold coins in 1966 to stop the pound's decline. Britain wasn't even on the gold standard then. They just wanted control. This ban lasted until 1979, over a decade of Brits forbidden from holding significant gold. And then there's Benito Mussolini and Italy. In 1935, Mussolini faced a recession and knew he needed gold. So he didn't confiscate it outright like America did. He was smarter than that. He launched the Gold for the Fatherland initiative. Citizens were encouraged to voluntarily donate their gold rings, necklaces, any gold they had. In exchange, they received a steel wristband that said "Gold for the Fatherland." The propaganda was so effective that even Mussolini's wife Racheli donated her wedding ring. People felt patriotic about surrendering their wealth. The government netted 35 tons of gold, 1.23 million ounces, from these donations. The genius of this approach was that it looked voluntary. It felt patriotic. Nobody could say they were being robbed because they had chosen to give it away. But the outcome was identical to what Roosevelt did. Gold moved from private hands to government vaults. The only difference was the method of coercion. And here's what should keep you awake at night. This isn't just history. It's a template that's still active. Governments today don't need to confiscate gold the same way because most people don't hold physical gold anymore. But the principle remains: capital controls, border restrictions on wealth, freeze orders on bank accounts in crisis, seizures under asset forfeiture laws, negative interest rates that penalise savers. These are all modern versions of the same impulse, the same governmental need to control wealth and consolidate power. When Lebanon's banks froze accounts in 2019, it was the gold confiscation of 1933 wearing a 21st century mask. When governments talk about banning cash or forcing digital currencies, they're playing out the same scenario. They want to eliminate forms of wealth they can't control. The lesson from 1933 isn't just that the government confiscated gold. It's that it worked. Americans complied. They turned over their wealth, the government profited. The economy recovered enough that most people forgot it ever happened. And once a precedent is set, once people have accepted that it can be done, it becomes easier to do again. That's why understanding this history matters. Not because it will repeat exactly, but because the instinct to repeat it is always there, waiting for the next crisis. The next moment when governments decide that control matters more than property rights. And the people who survive those moments are never the ones who hope it won't happen. They're the ones who remember that it already did. If this opened your eyes to how power really works, hit subscribe. What happened once can happen again. The clues are always there.